You hear it first. Not the screams, those come later. It's the rumble, low and endless, like thunder trapped in the earth. Dust sifts through the latticed screens, coating your tongue with the taste of dry bone. Then the horns, deep, guttural blasts that vibrate in your chest, calling beasts from the steppes. The air thickens with smoke, sharp and acrid, carrying the faint rot of unburied dead from the outer walls. Your hands tremble as you clutch the silk veil, the one embroidered with silver threads that caught the caliph's eye last moon. Around you, shadows shift in the dim glow of oil lamps, sisters in captivity, mothers to princes unborn, dancers whose feet once graced marble floors. Whispers rise like steam from a hidden spring. They are at the eastern gate. The guards fled at dawn. A girl no older than 12 presses against her aunt, eyes wide as polished onyx. The ground shakes again. Closer now. You strain to see through the carved wood, past the gardens where jasmine bloomed under starlight. There, silhouettes on horseback, bows curved like scimitars, faces broad and unyielding under fur caps. They pour like a black tide, arrows whistling through the air, finding throats before words can form. The first cries pierce the harem's veil, not of men, but of the world unraveling. And in that moment, as the bronze gates groan and splinter under iron rams, you wonder not if the end comes, but what form it will take. For the riders from the east do not conquer, they unmake. What follows is a tale of calculated ruin, drawn from the dust-choked chronicles of those who survived the unimaginable. It touches on acts of profound violation, the shattering of bodies and souls in the shadow of empire. These events, etched in ink and bone, demand respect for the silenced. If the weight grows too heavy, pause. Honor bids us witness not to revel, but to remember the machinery of such falls. For those who press on, we turn not to the spectacle of pain, but to the gears that ground a golden age to ash. This was no storm of barbarian fury, lashing out in blind rage against a glittering prize. No, the fall of Baghdad in that bitter winter of 1258 was the cold precision of an empire's ledger conquest as accounting, where cities balanced against the Khan's unyielding tally of submission. Baghdad, the beating heart of the Abbasid realm, sprawled along the Tigris like a jeweled serpent, its canals fed by the lifeblood of 2 rivers, its markets humming with silks from Cathay and spices from the Indies. For 5 centuries, under caliphs who styled themselves shadows of God on earth, it had been the crossroads of worlds. Scholars debating Aristotle in moonlit halls, astronomers charting stars that whispered secrets of the divine. Yet by the mid-13th century, that splendor masked fractures deep as fault lines. The Abbasid Caliphate, once a sunburst of learning from Cordoba to Samarkand, had dimmed under weak rulers and grasping viziers. Al-Mustasim, the 37th Caliph, ruled a court bloated with luxury hunting, falcons jeweled in gold, harems swollen with beauties from every corner of the realm, while his armies crumbled to rust. Messengers from the east had come for years, bearing edicts from the great Khan: bend the knee or face the horde. Al-Mustasim, secure behind walls thick as history, sent back taunts wrapped in silk. He mistook the Mongols for another wave of raiders, to be bought off with tribute. He did not grasp the machine, approaching a vast, oiled engine of horse and bow, forged in the fires of a steppe-born storm. The stakes? Everything. For the Mongols, Baghdad was the keystone to an arc from the Pacific's edge to the Mediterranean's shore, a vault of knowledge to plunder or purge. For the Caliph's people, it was home, faith, future. Its fall would not merely topple thrones, it would scatter seeds of doubt across an ummah already sown with schism. And today, echoes linger in every archive razed by war, every library burned in the name of ideology. This machine did not die in 1258, it hums still, in the quiet calculus of power that devours the vulnerable first. From the windswept plains of Mongolia, where eagles rode thermals above felt tents, rose an empire that redefined terror as strategy. Genghis Khan, born Temujin in 1162 amid clan wars that left him orphaned and enslaved, had welded fractious tribes into a thunderbolt. By his death in 1227, his riders had carved a realm spanning continents, their bows loosing death from horseback with a precision that turned battles into harvests. It was no accident of fury. Genghis built a system yam stations for lightning couriers, censuses to tally taxable souls, codes that bound loyalty with iron oaths. Conquered peoples were not erased wholesale, but folded in. Engineers from China to hurl fire pots, Persian scribes to scribe decrees in flawless script. His grandson Hulagu inherited this forge. Born around 1217 to Ptolemy, the Khan's youngest son, and the shrewd Sor Ghatani Beki, a Nestorian Christian whose counsel shaped empires, Hulagu grew in the shadow of Karakorum, the clan's raw-hewn capital. He was no wild colt. Tutors drilled him in astronomy from Baghdad's own texts, while shamans whispered of Tigris' blue vault demanding dominion. Yet 3 scars marked his path to Baghdad, each a whetstone for the blade he would wield. First, the cradle of loss. In 1241, as Mongol Tumans ravaged Eastern Europe, Hulagu's father, Ptolemy, drank a poisoned chalice to spare his brother Ogedei, the Khan's life, a ritual self-sacrifice that echoed Genghis's own brutal pragmatism. Hulagu, barely 24, watched his father's body commit to the eternal blue sky, learning that empire fed on its own blood. Grief hardened to resolve. Loyalty was not sentiment, but survival's edge. 2 years later, in 1243, Hulagu wed Doku's Khatun, a Karait princess of unyielding faith, her Christianity a quiet counterpoint to the steppe shamanism. She bore him sons who would rule realms Abaka to Guder, but her influence ran deeper. Dokuis urged mercy for the people of the book, Christians spared in the coming storm. Yet Hulagu saw in her the Khan's unsparing math, love as alliance, faith as tool. When his brother Monka ascended as Great Khan in 1251, Hulagu knelt in the golden tent, receiving a mandate etched in blood: subdue the western Islamic lands, from the assassin's mountain fortresses to the caliph's gilded cage. The turning point came in 1256, atop the jagged peaks of Alamut. The Order of Assassins, those veiled daggers of Ismaili heresy, had plagued Mongol envoys with poison and blade for decades. Hulagu's siege engines, borrowed from Chinese masters, shattered their eagles' nests one by one. As the last imam, Rukn al-Din Kurshah, crawled from his cave-begging quarter, Hulagu weighed him like a merchant's scale. The imam lived 3 days, his body flayed as warning. In that red dawn, paranoia crystallized into policy. Defiance was not personal slight, but viral threat. To cure it, excise the root. Baghdad, with its caliph mocking from afar, became the next incision. Hulagu's host swelled to a river of steel, perhaps 150,000 souls, from Mongol corps to Georgian infantry, Armenian lancers, and Chinese sappers versed in gunpowder's whisper. They marched west in 1253, Mongki's decree a lash at their backs: succeed or join the ghosts of failed Khans. By autumn 1257, scouts crested the Zagros Mountains, eyes falling on the Tigris Valley's emerald haze. Hulagu, broad-shouldered under lamellar armor chased with gold, scanned the horizon from his white tent. "The shadow of God falls," he murmured to Dokuz, her cross glinting in lamplight. Below lay Baghdad, walls rising like a mirage, minarets piercing the sky. The machine turned. Winter gripped the world that January of 1258, frost rhyming the Tigris's banks where date palms bowed like supplicants. Baghdad awoke to a city in full bloom, or so it seemed. Canals laced the round metropolis, their waters drawn from Euphrates and Tigris to irrigate orchards heavy with pomegranate and fig. The Caliph's palace, a labyrinth of iwans and domes, hummed with the realm's pulse viziers in brocade robes tallying tribute, muezzin's calls weaving through the clamor of bazaars, where Coptic traders haggled over Frankish glass. In the heart of it all lay the Harem, a veiled oasis within the round city. Veiled arches of rose quartz-framed courtyards where fountains murmured secrets, their spray catching sunlight in prisms of color. Here, sequestered from the world's gaze, dwelled Fatima. She had been 16 when scouts from the Caliph's agents found her in a Damascus silk merchant's home, hair like midnight rivers, eyes green as the first leaves of spring. Al-Mustasim, ever the collector of fleeting beauties, claimed her as his own, draping her in Samite gowns and bathing her in attar of roses. Fatima learned the harem's rhythms, the elder wives' quiet intrigues over sons' futures, the dancers' fluid steps that masked sharper ambitions, the concubines' shared laughter over honeyed locum in the afternoons. She was no stranger to sorrow. Her father, a poet exiled for verses too bold, had whispered of stars that guided wanderers home. The heavens remember, he'd said, before fever claimed him. In Baghdad, Fatima found solace in stolen moments slipping forbidden scrolls from the palace library, tracing lines of Rumi's verse under lantern light. "The wound is the place where the light enters you," she murmured one eve, as twilight bruised the sky mauve. Her companion Zainab, the singer from Isfahan, with a voice like honey over thorns. Young Aisha, whose laughter chased shadows, gathered close, braiding each other's hair with threads of saffron-dyed wool. They spoke of dreams, a life beyond walls, children who would know the wind's untrammeled song. But that eve, as lamps flickered to life, a tremor ran through the marble floors. Servants burst in, faces ashen, babbling of horsemen on the horizon, flat-faced riders from the dawn lands, their banners swallowing the sun. Fatima rose, heart a caged bird. From the belvedere she glimpsed them, a dark sea cresting the plains, dust devils in their wake. Hulagu's vanguard, 10,000 strong, had sealed the bridges, catapults like crouched dragons assembling under moonlight. Al-Mustasim summoned his council at dawn. The Caliph, soft-bellied from years of repose, paced the throne room, his viziers a murmur of silk and sweat. "They number as sands," one stammered, scrolls unrolling maps of forgotten campaigns. Scouts reported the Khan's terms: raise the walls, fill the moats, present the Caliph bareheaded in obeisance. Refusal meant flames. Al-Mustasim laughed, a hollow bark. Let the upstart taste Abbasid steel. He dispatched envoys laden with gold, but Hulagu's reply came swift, an arrow-pierced head returned on a lance. By the 29th of January, the siege engines roared. Trebuchets, manned by Han engineers, hurled naphtha jars that bloomed into fireballs, shattering gate towers and sprays of stone. Hulagu's Tumans circled like wolves, the right wing under Ket Buga, a grizzled Naaman, probing the northern flanks, the left, Buka, the Persian-born Mongol, flooding canals to drown outlying farms. The royal center, Hulagu's own, hammered the eastern walls, arrows darkening the sky like a plague of locusts. Inside the harem, tension coiled like smoke. Fatima pressed her ear to a screen as the first breaches echoed, wood splintering, men howling. Guards, once swaggering lions, now fled in droves, their armor clattering like dry leaves. Zainab clutched a lute, fingers white-knuckled. "Sing for us, sister," Aisha begged, but the notes died in her throat. Fatima drew them into the innermost chamber, barricading the door with ebony chests. "We are the Caliph's treasure," she whispered, voice steady as a minaret. "They will not touch what is sacred," yet doubt gnawed. Rumors swirled. The Caliph's army drowned in engineered floods. 12,000 souls lost to Hulagu's cunning. The outer city burned, its libraries feeding pyres that lit the night orange. On the 10th of February, as catapult stones rained like divine wrath, Al-Mustasim broke. He rode out under white flags, 3,000 nobles trailing like ghosts, imams in threadbare robes, sayyids clutching genealogies to prove descent from the prophet. Hulagu received them in his command tent, a sprawl of felt and captured banners, his face impassive under a helmet crested with eagle feathers. "Your Caliph yields," the envoy stammered. Hulagu's eyes, dark as steppe nights, flicked to the trembling figure, too late for mercy. "But enter, and see the Khan's grace." The nobles crossed the lines, arms unbound as promised. Hulagu's guards closed ranks. Axes rose and fell, in a rhythm like harvest scythes. 3,000 heads rolled in the dust, their blood soaking the parched earth. Al-Mustasim watched from his litter, face drained of color. Back in the city, the gates creaked open. Hulagu's decree flew on falcon wings. "Christians, mark your doors. The rest, prepare." Fatima felt the shift before the sounds confirmed it, the hush falling over the harem like a shroud. Then the thunder of hooves on marble, boots echoing through forbidden halls. The outer doors shattered. Laughter, guttural and foreign, mingled with shattering pottery. A servant girl stumbled in, robes torn, eyes vacant. "They come," she gasped, collapsing. Fatima barred the final portal, her companions huddling in the alcove's gloom. Prayers rose in ragged chorus, verses from the book threading the air like fragile silk. The invaders breached at midday on the 13th. a flood of fur-clad warriors spilling into the palace. Hulagu's code held, no spilling royal blood on sacred soil, but for the harem's keepers, no such restraint. They dragged forth the caliph's wives and daughters, veils ripped like paper, silks trampled under calloused feet. Fatima peered through a crack as the first wave surged past broad faces scarred by wind and blade, eyes alight with the conqueror's fire. One, a captain with a braided beard, seized Zainab by the wrist, her scream cut short by a gauntleted hand. Time stretched, each breath a stolen mercy. Fatima whispered to Aisha, "Crawl to the gardens if we must. The roses hide tunnels, but the roses burn now, their petals curling black in the blaze." Hulagu himself entered the throne room, Dokis at his side, her gaze averted from the caliph's prostrate form. "Your treasures are mine," the Khan declared, voice even as a clerk's ledger. Al-Mustasim, stripped of finery, begged for his women's lives. Hulagu waved a hand, "Sort them. The fairest to Karakoram, the rest to my men's reward." Outside, the machine ground on. Warriors, incentivized by shares of spoil gold dinars, ivory combs, bolts of damask systematically stripped the inner sanctum. Fatima's door buckled under a ram's blow. She shoved Aisha behind a tapestry, facing the splintered gap alone. The first Mongol through was young, perhaps 20, his lamellar smeared with soot. His eyes widened at her, not with lust, but the raw hunger of one who had marched moons without sight of beauty. For the Khan, he growled in broken Arabic, lunging. She struck with a shard of porcelain, drawing blood across his cheek. He staggered, bellowing. Chaos erupted more hands, rough voices, barking orders in tongues of horse and sky. Fatima fought, nails raking flesh, until a blow felled her world to black. When light returned, it was to a courtyard awash in ruin. Bodies lay twisted amid shattered fountains, the air heavy with jasmine charred to bitterness. Fatima stirred, ribs aflame, her gown in rags. Aisha was gone. Zainab's lute lay splintered nearby, strings humming faintly in the breeze. She crawled to the wall, hiding in the shadow of a toppled column, as processions formed. Chains of women, thousands strong, herded toward the river docks. Hulagu's scribes tallied them like livestock beauties for the Khan's distant tents, others parceled to loyal Tumans. Fatima glimpsed Al-Mustasim, wrapped in carpet to spare the earth his blood, trampled under hooves as his screams muffled to gurgles. This was no frenzy of one man's grudge. It was the system's pulse. Warriors rewarded with flesh to bind their spears tighter to the Khan, survivors seated as spies in far courts. Fatima learned later, from whispers in the slave lines, that Hulagu's engineers diverted the Tigris, letting its floods scour the dead from streets choked with 200,000 souls. Libraries fed the flames, their inks blackening the waters. Yet, in that deluge, parallels whisper today refugee columns snaking from shattered homes, the vulnerable auctioned in shadows of superpower games. The machine endures, its victims ever the threadbare human cost. But that enumeration of horror was only the hinge. From the vantage of a survivor, a Frankish merchant's widow named Maria, who had wed into Baghdad's Christian quarter and marked her door with a cross at Dokis's behest, the spread revealed the horde's true ingenuity. Maria huddled in the Church of St. Mary, its vaulted nave a fragile ark amid the storm. Through arrow slits, she watched the calculus unfold, not as chaos, but as a vast, interlocking web. Hulagu's army was no mindless swarm. It was a hierarchy of incentives, each Tumen a cog, reporting to the Khan. Captains like Ketbuga, the Naiman veteran whose right wing had sealed the northern escape, claimed first shares dozens of women from the palace outer rings. Their fates bartered for loyalty. Lower ranks followed. Villages beyond the walls emptied in ripple. Whole hamlets of weavers and potters marched to the steps, their skills taxed for the empire's looms. Maria saw it in the ledgers her husband once copied scribes in Hulagu's train, quills scratching tallies under lantern light. 500 from the silk district, 200 artisans spared for Maragay. The machinery extended tentacles. In the weeks after the gates fell, Hulagu's spies, Persian converts, with tongues silver, as daggers fanned through survivor camps, promising amnesty for names of hidden gold. Incentives flowed upward. A warrior who unearthed a vizier's cache earned a harem share, binding him tighter to the chain. From Maria's perch, the harem's dispersal unfolded like a merchant's auction. On the third day, As pyres smoked the horizon, Hulagu's aides sorted the captives by a grim bazaar. The caliph's daughters, veiled in remnants of state, chained for the long ride to Karakorum. Common concubines, their veils torn, parceled to encampments where laughter turned to cries under canvas flaps. A breather came unbidden, in the quiet irony of survival. Maria slipped out at dusk, foraging in the palace ruins, and found a lone Mongol boy, perhaps 12, separated from his unit, huddled by a fountain's dry basin. He clutched a pilfered pear, its juice staining his sleeve, eyes wide at the marble's faded glory. "Home?" he asked in halting words, pointing east. Maria tore her shawl, offering bread from her hidden stores. For a moment, the machine paused, two children of worlds collided, sharing fruit amid ash. He vanished at dawn, but the pear's sweetness lingered, a dark contrast to the salt of tears soaking the stones. The escalation crested not in the palace, but the suburbs, where the system's reach bared its teeth. Hulagu dispatched Buka's left wing to scour the Sawad plains, fertile breadbasket turned charnel ground. There, incentives twisted crueler. Tumans competed for harvests, whole family lines vanishing into slave caravans snaking toward Tabriz. One brief tableau etched Maria's memory, a potter's widow from the eastern wards, her hands clay-caked, bartering her last ewer for her daughter's release. The captain laughed, claiming both. "The Khan counts souls, not tears," he spat, as the girl was led away. Maria fled north by spring, joining a Christian convoy under Doku's protection, her cart laden with salvaged icons. In Damascus, tales converged, the harem's remnants scattered like chaff, fueling the horde's bonds. Hulagu's machine had spread not just death, but a new order tax rolls redrawn in Mongol script, resistance priced in flesh. Yet, in that web, cracks glimmered, a Tumen mutiny over divided spoils, whispers of the Khan's overreach echoing back to Karakorum. From Maria's escape, the tale shifts to the core, the breaking, where the system's weight crushed even its architect. Hulagu stood atop the Caliphal ziggurat on the 17th, the seventh day of Sack, as flames crowned the city like a funeral pyre. Below, the Tigris churned, its waters a slurry of ink and crimson, scrolls from the House of Wisdom bobbing like drowned leaves. He had come for submission, now he reaped erasure. Slow now, the air hangs thick, each breath labored under smoke's veil. Hulagu paces the summit, Doku's at his elbow, her face a mask of quiet dissent. The Khan, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, surveys his work. Reports flood in from aides, 90,000 counted in the streets alone, though the true toll swells like a hidden spring, perhaps 800,000. The chronicles later murmur, though scribes round to vagueness, as if numbers could contain such void. The harem's core remains, a final ledger, thousands herded to the riverbank, sorted under torchlight. Hulagu's voice cuts the night, the fairest for the great Khan, the rest to seal oaths. Time dilates in the penumbra. Fatima, chained among the throng, feels the night's chill seep through her torn samite. Beside her, survivors huddle Zainab, throat bruised but spirit unbowed, humming a fragment of verse. Aisha, found in the garden's undercroft, eyes hollow as spent wells. The warriors circle, faces gaunt from the march, hands greedy for the prize that buys their place in the horde's unbreaking line. A captain, the one Fatima scarred, drags her forward, his cheek a livid map. "This one fights," he growls to his lord. Laughter ripples, coarse as gravel. Hulagu descends the stairs, his presence a gathering storm. He appraises her not as man to woman, but appraiser to asset. To Karakorum, he decrees, voice flat as steppe wind. Fatima spits at his feet, earning a backhand that splits her lip. Blood warms her chin, a small defiance in the machine's maw. The peak fractures there, in the overreach's quiet bloom. Hulagu turns to the caliph, dragged forth in irons, his once lustrous beard matted with filth. Al-Mustasim kneels, babbling of ransoms vast as empires. The Khan circles him, slow as a vulture's shadow. "You hoarded gold while my envoys begged bread," Hulagu says, gesturing to the treasury's wagons groaning under dirhams. Legend claims he starved the caliph amid his wealth, but truth is swifter, crueler, wrapped in felt to spare the soil, trampled by mounts until bones snapped like dry reeds. His last gaze met Fatima's across the throng plea, shame, oblivion. The crack widens as dawn gilds the haze. A sub-commander, Buka, approaches, voice low. The men tire, lord. The Mamluks stir in Egypt. Scouts report Egyptian lancers massing at Ain Jalut. Hulagu's fist clenches, the weight of divided fronts pressing. He had planned for Syria next, but the system's gears snag overextended supply lines. Tumans fractious from gorged bellies. Dokui's murmurs, mercy buys more than blades. For the first time, the Khan hesitates, ordering a halt to the river's harvest. Fatima, unchained in the confusion, slips into the throng's edge, Zainab's hand finding hers. They melt into the dawn fog, two shadows among thousands fleeing east. The breaking was not the victims alone. Hulagu's machine, oiled on terror, overheated on its own excess. He withdrew by March, leaving Baghdad a husk canals clogged with refuse, minarets toppled like felled dates. The crack? His gaze lingered too long on the horizon, where Egyptian spies already whispered of the horde's belly. Hulagu pressed west regardless, his host splintered by the news of Mongol's death in far China. At Ain Jalut in September 1260, Mamluk lances shattered the right wing, Ketbuga falling with a cry that echoed back to the steppes. Hulagu retreated to Azerbaijan, founding the Ilkhanate in 1256, a splinter realm where Persian scribes softened Mongol edges, Islam seeping into courts like ink into parchment. He died in 1265, gout-ridden on an island in Lake Urmia, Dokius at his side, his sons Abaka and Teguder inheriting a throne built on ash. For survivors, the ledger closed in fragments. Fatima reached Mosul by summer, her body a map of bruises, spirit forged in the harem's final forge. She wed a Coptic healer, birthing daughters who learned her tales not as scars, but seeds, verses recited under safer stars. Zainab's voice carried to Cairo's courts, a thread of song weaving through Mamluk halls. Aisha vanished into the Sufi orders, her laughter reborn in dervish spins. Baghdad's remnants scattered, 200,000 souls perhaps, rebuilding in the ruins, their canals slowly cleared by patient hands. Power shifted like desert sands. The Abbasid line flickered on in Cairo's shadow caliphs, puppets to Mamluk sultans who styled themselves guardians of the faith. The Ilkhanate bloomed briefly, Hulagu's heirs converting to Islam by 1295, their courts in Tabriz alight with Persian miniatures glow. Yet the irony bites. Hulagu's engineers, meant to drown resistance, taught irrigation that fed new realms. The scrolls he burned seeded translations in Maragay's observatory, where Nasir al-Din al-Tusi Hulagu's own astrologer charted heavens unbowed. Long-term, the fall birthed a fractured Ummah. Cairo rose as sun to Baghdad's set, its scholars guarding Aristotle, while Anatolia birthed Ottoman stirrings. The machine's echo, a world where caliphs learned humility, Khans tasted limits, power's wheel turning, ever grinding the fragile beneath. In the vaults of Mosul's museum, unearthed in 1,932 digs, a modern hand sifts the silt. Gertrude Bell, the English archaeologist desert rider, Baghdad's first curator, brushed away Tigris mud to reveal Abbasid shards. A porcelain shard from the Harem's basin, etched with a rose motif, a scorched fragment of vellum, Rumi's verse clinging to char. Bell, who mapped Iraq's borders amid colonial winds, saw in them not relics, but rebukes. These were lives, she wrote in her letters, amid the grit of trenches where Bedouins shared tea under starlit digs. Her finds, catalogued in the Iraq Museum by 1932, proved the sack's scar. Layers of ash capping Golden Age pottery, canals realigned by Mongol floods. By the 1972, Iraqi teams under Wahid Qayyum deepened the probe, unearthing the round city's ghost harem foundations cracked by siege stones, irrigation gates twisted by naphtha blasts. Satellite scans in the 2000s, led by University of Chicago's McGuire Gibson, mapped the floodplain's scars, confirming Hulagu's diversions choked fields for decades. These tangible ghosts, bricks stamped with caliphal seals, ink-faded folios humanize the ledgers. Qayyum, a Baghdad native whose grandfather fled the 1,258 echoes in folk tales, held a unearthed comb. Its ivory teeth snapped. A woman's hand once held this, he noted in his 1985 report, Bridging 7 Centuries. Why does it matter now? In boardrooms where algorithms price human tides, or archives bombed in endless wars, the lesson endures. Power's true terror lies not in the blade, but the system that dulls empathy to efficiency. Hulagu's horde reminds us resistance blooms in the overlooked. A woman's verse, a scholar's saved scroll, a digger's patient trowel, it teaches that erasure invites rebirth, human nature's stubborn root pushing through ash. Transcending 1,258 smoke, it whispers a universal. The vulnerable are history's ink, and to forget them is to invite the machine's return. Return with me to that splintered gate, the rumble fading to echo. The horsemen ride on, their thunder swallowed by horizon. But the jasmine regrows, stubborn in cracked soil. Fatima's daughters, generations hence, trace her green eyes in a mirror unbroken. The Tigris runs clear again, carrying not blood, but the faint, persistent black of stories that refuse the pyre. They were meant to vanish the women of the veiled halls, their laughter silenced, their names unscribed in the Khan's vast tally. Hulagu's riders scattered them like chaff to the winds, from Karakoram's frozen courts to the Ilkhanate's silk pavilions, bodies bartered for oaths, spirits bent but unbreaking. Yet they endured, not in gold or marble, but in the stubborn weave of memory. A Damascus singer's ballad, hummed in Mamluk mehfils, a Sufi verse whispered in Anatolian khanqahs, shards unearthed by hands collused from newer sieges, proving flesh outlasts empires. And now they stand with you, in this shared breath between words, because you chose to listen not to the roar, but the quiet that follows. Their light enters through the wound of history, illuminating the gears we might yet dismantle. If this tale stirred something in you, a question on the harem's hidden voices, or the machine's modern guises, drop it in the comments below. Your words keep these echoes alive. And remember, the best histories aren't those we conquer, but those that conquer us.